just a second, let me go ahead and ask the Lord's blessing here. Lord, I thank you for being here. I pray that you would watch over the words of my mouth and help this to be yet another awesome time, Lord. Thank you. In your name, amen. So, I know you will hear me. I'm the keynote, and you'll also hear me say, "Wow, this is going to be awesome." It is not because I'm the keynote that I know this is going to be awesome. It's because I have been through so many ICCMs that I have learned what makes an ICCM awesome. And it really has to do with the fact that where two or more are gathered, God is there. And when God is there, it is going to be awesome. And this whole keynote, when we were talking about this thing, people were talking about being discouraged or needing encouragement, is just being weary after the whole COVID time. And I said, this is actually going to be the easiest keynote ever to give. Because if I completely botch it, everyone will still leave ICCM encouraged. It's just the nature of ICCM. It is going to build you up, whether or not I am a part of it. So I said, this is great. I can do this. All right, so we kind of came up with the catchy title, Plugging In When the Power is Out. We had a whole bunch of different things, and anyway, I don't move on. I'm going to talk about, in this type, who are we? In many cases, who are you? But I'm going to do it in a kind of a roundabout way. I'm going to talk a little bit about me, how I came a part of ICCM, how I'm a part of missions, who I am, who God made me, why am I actually useful in God's kingdom. I'm talking about me not because I want to talk about me, but because this is going to be a segue. I'm going to, at the end of this, encourage you guys to tell each other your stories. Who are you and why are you here? Because a big part of being encouraged is remembering who brought you to the place that you are at. And when you remember God is the one that orchestrated this, He brought me here to this position, that is a very encouraging thing. We tend to forget who we are, why we're here, what we're doing, and why we're doing it. But when we reconnect with a lot of that, it actually can help us a lot. So that's kind of today's thing in short. So the wires are such that I have to kind of lean over here to get my, should probably have plugged in my mouse and click it from here today. All right, we'll do that next time. All right, who am I? Oh, yeah, it's okay.
You can lean the mic over that way if you want.
No, okay. I'm actually fine.
Okay.
I'm all right. Okay, so I am a Lightsys consultant. That's kind of my title, which is kind of like trying to describe ICCM. If we were to describe ICCM, everybody who has been a part of ICCM will describe it completely different. Because ICCM, God meets us where we're at, and everyone is at a different spot. And so their interaction with ICCM is going to be completely different. And so, anyway, it's just really hard to explain. When we talk about me, what do I do? It's different for everybody. Some people say, Tim Young, he's the web expert. The other guy goes, Tim Young, he's the networking guy. Tim Young. Anyway, I'm me. All right. I visit between 5 and 30 different ministries a year. In person, I come, I stay at your organization. I've visited over 180 organizations or distinct offices in 18 countries, mainly in the US though. When I was first attending ICCM, I literally stumbled into ICCM, and some of the ICCMers were discussing the need for, they call it a well-funded itinerant guru. And actually a couple, George over there mentioned that yesterday. He's like, Tim, don't you remember? And I'm like, yeah, it's a part of my keynote. But I didn't say that. I literally, my schedule at that time, I was trying to do a missions trip overseas. I ended up logistically having problems, which my wife will roll her eyes and say, that's why I do the logistics of this family. And I was stranded on a campus kind of like this. I didn't have anything to do. I was wandering through the halls heading towards the computer labs thinking, well, maybe I don't have my own computer, I'll play with the campus computers. And I walked up and there was this big pile of snacks outside, which your guys are going to be meeting that pile of snacks shortly. And there was a bunch of people standing around with these snacks. And as I was walking past all the food, I heard snippets of tech talk. They're talking technology. There's food. This must be awesome. And they just invited me in and said, sit down, enjoy the conference. And I sat down, and one of the things they talked about was the need for a well-funded itinerant guru. So well-funded meant self-funded. We can't pay anybody. So we need somebody that we don't need to worry about the money. Itinerant, traveling, we wanted somebody. Now, people are always very happy when I come. And I remind them, you're also going to be very happy when I leave, which is the case. I am very disruptive. When I'm staying there, the IT guys focus on me. And everyone else in the office is like, boy, I need my stuff fixed. But we get all sorts of things done. It's really good. We get all this stuff ramped up. But everybody is ready for me to leave so life can go back to normal. So they're very happy to see me come. See it go, and they wanted a guru. First one, know-it-all, smart aleck. Here we go, computer guy. That's what they were looking for. Somebody who knew enough stuff about computers to help out. And this is what they were asking for. God put me in this. I over the time, I realized that person was going to be me. And I thought that this was the definition of my role. It just seemed like a good fit. We're going to talk about what it really turns out to be here in a minute. But this is a sample year. This was 2018. This was the roadmap that we went on in 2018. But we also went to Kenya during that time and traveled around a bit there. Got to see a bit of the US. This was 2012. I don't have the actual roads. All the red were states that we went through in 2012. So we travel a lot. So we got that itinerant portion down. How did I become this guy? So I am a missionary kid. I grew up in Mexico, the United States, and Canada. We lived in the motorhome, the Turtle. Now, it's hard to see, but this is actually me. I'm the one who's looking at the engine, oohing and aahing over the engine problems that my dad was having at that particular time. I could actually tell 3 or 4 hours of stories about this particular picture, namely that sweater. That sweater lived a very, very long time, much longer than my parents wanted it to. That was kind of my security sweater. And I have stories, I was blown up in that sweater, I was dunked in sewage in that sweater. I had all sorts of things happen. But anyway, that's not a part of this particular story. But there were 7 of us kids, and my parents traveled in this motorhome around Mexico, the United States, and Canada. That was me. My dad built the motorhome, the Turtle, and this is just some pictures showing its evolution a little bit. He also built our house. So with 7 kids, we lived in an 8-foot by 40-foot trailer, sort of. My dad started modifying it. They built on the top and the sides, and they built this thing. This is an 8-foot by 40-foot trailer. At the time of this picture that it's showing right here, there is still a trailer hitch on it. For a very long time, they wouldn't let my dad take the trailer hitch off, as if you could actually pull that 8-foot guy. But they find it also had a license plate on it, not an active license plate. Just so anyway. At this point in time, it is a 9-bedroom, 4-bathroom, has a basement. It also has secret tunnels and passages. It has one of those bookshelves that's a secret door. And anyway, it's a neat place. But during some of this time, as the trailer and stuff was under construction, it was parked on the driveway of the house. One of my brothers and my mom and I, we were walking towards the house. I don't remember, we had just gone shopping or something, but the 3 of us were walking in towards the house and we looked over, and the trailer was rolling towards the house. There was nothing attached to it, but we hadn't leveled the driveway sufficiently, and the trailer was just kind of drifting towards the house. And we looked at that, and we all said, this is a bad issue. You don't want this thing to smash through. And so in my, I was probably 13, 14-year-old brain or something like that, I said to myself, I need to fix this problem. Seeing enough Superman movies and everything like that, I knew the appropriate thing was to get behind it. So I squeezed between the trailer and the house, and I started pushing. Mighty man that I am. My mom, who was there, suddenly saw these two things, this moving object and the immovable object, and seeing her son dart in between the two and start to push, she started to yell encouragement. And while I was doing it, my brother who was there, and like, hey Mike, chock the wheels, put something under the wheels, which was going to be much more effective at stopping this thing. But there I was pushing mightily, and my mom hollering, Tim, get out from there, and push harder, and Mike, chock the wheels to save my son from getting squished. Anyway, okay, yes, there we go. Mike, save your brother. So, anyway, I was a strong kid back then. This picture, I actually had to dredge up, look long and hard through my memory to find this photo. And I couldn't find it in my dad's thing, so I actually had to gimp it a little bit and Photoshop stuff. Anyway. Back then, actually, this is a bad picture because I had more hair back then. Anyway, we'll move on. But my mom, when we were done with this, my mom was shaking her head. Oh, my son, my son. And she said this phrase about me. She says, Tim, you have a hero syndrome. My mom says, I am a hero. So I translate that, of course, my hero. My mom says, I am her hero. This is awesome. And so you kind of have to be a little optimistic to hear some of that in there. But that was it. I was a hero. And so how does that roll forward in today? My job is I visit a mission organization. I visit for a week and I help out in their IT departments. And this is a description that I'm going to use a number of times throughout this thing. It's an analogy. I get to see them in their techie pits of despair. All right. So I get to see the problems that they're facing and I get to help them through it a little bit. Now, we have a couple of consultant type people in here, and so you'll understand the right way to do this. You approach the rim of the pit with caution, you examine the pit, you see the tech in the bottom of the pit, you figure out how to get a rope to them. That's not what I do. This hero syndrome comes into play. My approach is I see the pit of despair and I throw myself into the pit. I gaze up at the walls in awe. Wow, this is an amazing pit. And then I say this, how are we going to get out of this one? How are we going to get out of this one? And I was trying to think of different descriptions of how I can explain this, but one of my friends, Roy Campbell, for a number of years would come to ICCM, and every year he was complaining, oh, Tim, I have just come from Africa. We need to have an ICCM Africa. Oh, there's all these guys. There's so much capability. These guys are trained so well. There's all this, or not trained so well. They have so much responsibility, but they're lacking some of the training. They're lacking the community. They're lacking, we need to have an ICCM Africa. And then Roy's like, I need to do something about this. And year after year, he would say, I need to do something about this. So finally, I turned to him and I said, okay, Roy, what are we gonna do? And he looked at me, and his eyes got big, and he says, Does that mean your wife is going to help? It was this sudden realization that he was not alone in his trial, in his pain, in his different things. And he's like, together we can do something. And so, as I describe sort of my main skill in life, I am a professional techie pit of despair escape artist. We get in people's pits and we get back out. And that sounds much better than a professional faller into techie pits dummy. Because I just throw myself in onto it. But that's great. Okay. So when we're at somebody's place and we escape their techie pit, you know what people do? They jump into another pit and they say, Tim, come into this one as well. This is even better. All right. And then I ooh and ah at their techie pit of despair and we get out of that one. Okay. So I thought what ICCM needed was a well-funded itinerant guru. But what they really needed was an encourager, someone who would become one of them, see their problems from their perspective, and face the problems with them. And this is a form of bearing one another's burdens. It really is. You look at what I do, and you look at what the Bible says we should do, and you're just like, well, it's actually a simple thing. You just be there with people, and we help them out through their problems. So we are weary, and we're going to talk a bit more about COVID and its effects and just kind of the understanding of different things that have happened. But in general, I'm actually going to talk about even the pre-COVID world. We're going to look at just some very simple statistics and I'm going to say, yeah, you are weary and you should be, and it is normal. You're not, okay, I was about to say you're not abnormal, but I do know you guys. But the whole COVID situation and the lockdown and everything has been taking it out of everybody. And it's hard on the IT department as well, and we're going to talk a bit about that here. So, Forbes magazine, 2018, pre-COVID and stuff, all right? They say that 40% of the IT workforce in the USA is suffering from burnout, all right? So this is not just, I'm a little bit tired and need some coffee. 40% of the IT workforce was suffering from burnout before COVID came and made things extra difficult. All right?
Oh, very well.
It was. First I thought somebody was throwing something at me. That does happen every once in a while.
We can arrange for that.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if you did. And here's some of the things that they listed. We're going to talk about some of these things here. Unfair compensation. All right. We're not going to actually touch about this one too much in the missions workforce, but we'll just kind of say, you kind of double or triple this particular aspect of things when you're talking about missions and salary and stuff. It's not you double or triple the salary, you just kind of half or quarter the salary, and then you're a missionary. Okay. The unreasonable workload and too much overtime work. These are things that are listed. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well in a bit greater detail. But I'm going to say this is actually by design, but God's design, not man's design. And we're going to talk a bit more about that here. All right. But we're going to actually come back to a few of these other things as we look at some of these things. But a part of also what I want to add to this is beyond what Forbes was saying. This is just about who we are. And again, I have visited a whole bunch of you in your native habitat, not just ICCM, but in your organizations, and I see how things go. Actually, tomorrow I'm going to show you some video footage that I took at one of your organizations. Anyway, but the nature of our job is that we deal with other people's problems. All right, you guys do a lot what I do. You make it your own problem as well. But with that, we often are protecting other users from the problems or by responding to the problems. Either way, we tend to have to face people on a daily basis. These are people in problem situations, often grumpy people. We're going to talk a little bit about that again as well. And then on top of that, the last year and a half, people are extra grumpy just because of everything else going on. Okay. And again, that one slide talked about how there's too much work. We are asked to do a task that is bigger than we are. All right, and we're going to drill into this a little bit. Not only do we have, as missionaries, very little resources. In the commercial world, they have large teams to manage the infrastructure that we do ourselves with a small team. I actually did a bit of reading up on research and trying to figure out the right tech to staff ratio and stuff. And it's all over the board. It all depends on a whole bunch of things. But really what it boils down to is most organizations, even with their large IT staff, consider themselves overworked. That's what that one Forbes slide was talking about. 40% of people are on burnout, and a big percentage of that is overwork, even with their large, well-funded teams. All right? I'm just going to blatantly say it. You guys are not a part of the large-funded teams. Anyway, yes, that's not you. We have a great lack of staff. Now, this should not be surprising. One of the many things that Jesus said is, the harvest is plentiful and you'll have all the people you ever need. No. He said the harvest is plentiful and you're going to be lacking IT, lacking servers, right? What was it he's missing? It's the people. We will always be lacking people, all right? And that's something that Jesus warned us about.
You're not helping here, Tim.
Well, but that is actually kind of the neat thing about it. Because our task is, if we had everything we needed, we would rely on ourselves. It is who we are as human beings. We see ourselves as the big, strong guy. In our own eyes, we think we can handle it. But we can't. And that is actually a part of God's design. We are called by God to do a God-sized task. All right? You cannot do all the mission stuff yourself. The body of Christ cannot do all this stuff by ourselves. We need God. Right? I'm not saying anything new here, but this is just one of those things we need to remember, is even in our IT role, the task that we're facing is way bigger than we are, and it is a good thing. We need to rely on God, and God is way bigger than those problems and whatnot. So the task, the missions task in itself requires changed hearts. And anyone who has been a parent knows you can't really just change your child's heart. Anyone who's been a teacher, you cannot change their heart, their mindset. Yeah, you sometimes have to pray an awful lot because God is the one who gets inside there and actually makes the difference. And that's the same way even with our IT stuff. Other things that makes IT interesting is we are shooting at a moving target. All right, we know IT changes. Technology is moving very rapidly. If you look at all the statistics, and they have all these awesome graphs of technology in the Middle Ages and how fast that was moving and all this stuff. And then we hit the last 30, 40 years. Whoosh, technology is skyrocketing. And who is supposed to keep abreast of the majority of all this technology?
We are.
Techies! Wahoo! You guys are supposed to be the best, the brightest, the know-it-alls, the people who can follow all this massively, rapidly changing stuff. And with all of this stuff, the new technologies, new phones, new operating systems, there comes all the new security concerns. Yay! And then...
Or lack of concern.
Or lack of concern, yes. And then on top of working, you're supposed to be protecting people, you're training people, you're getting them all go, and then they leave. People coming and going, and you don't have a stable area that you're working in. Everything is changing. Technology is changing, people are changing. And then the vision of what we're doing also changes. And this is kind of rough. You're at an organization and their focus is here and their focus is changing. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit here. It's supposed to be that way. It is good. All right. We come back to this Forbes slide. IT employees are feeling disconnected from their company's strategy and vision. This is pre-COVID stuff. All right. And I'm going to show all sorts of good slides about how in COVID, this is one of the big things that they're talking about is everybody is getting separated from everything else. We've got all this stuff going on and people are siloing, they're getting the smaller groups. Anyway, so there's a good reason why you are weary. Okay. You're feeling tired? Yeah, duh. This is the role that we are in as techies. All right. Ministry means we're dealing with people. People is what's important with our job, even though we think technology is important. You're a technologist. And, but it's really the people that why we do stuff. When you look at the Bible, and God didn't say, fill the earth with servers and subdue them. No. We're really here for the people. You look at God's overall plan and Revelation, all those things, it's not about web pages all over the world it is focusing on the people, the souls, the individuals. But I have to say, technology is important. If we turn off a random server, now I need to. How do I say this? I'm being recorded, so I have to be careful how I say this. But I have accidentally done this at different places where I'm at an organization and I accidentally shut down a server. Somebody was giving me a tour of an organization once, and they were wandering through the whole place, and they had their server was not plugged in properly. You know how you're supposed to take your power cable and jam that thing in so it's really actually in there? It wasn't in there. I don't know how in the world, but I brushed a power cable with my shoulder and the power cable fell out. And the server turned off. Now, when you turn off a random server in the organization, does the server get mad at you? No, it doesn't. The server might become corrupted. There's various issues and things like that. And who gets in trouble? The server does, right? No. Anyway. So users need the technology. We don't serve technology for technology's sake. We serve technology for, we'll call it the user's sake. That's like a generic big old catch-all phrase, the users. By keeping technology running smoothly, we are serving the people. And this is ministry. What we are doing is ministry. We are helping out with the people. And who gets in trouble? We are held responsible for technology. Technology is created by fallen humans. It contains bugs that are not our responsibility. So you can have software installed, that software fails, and you still get the blame. Woohoo! And we occasionally do goof, like I said. You can brush against the power cord. I don't know how many times I've been at organizations, you're remoted into a bunch of different things, and somebody goes and says, I'll shut this machine down, and they shut down the wrong machine, because they've got all these different desktops, and you think you're on one desktop, and you're on the other, and boom, down goes the email server, the file server, or whatever, and everyone's like, "Wah!" And we do that occasionally. With lots of responsibility comes a lot of goofs. And whether it's our fault or someone else's fault, we are still kind of held responsible for it. We take the blame. And on top of that, we feel responsibility. We feel, we failed. And we can turn it into guilt, and we can wallow in the fact that we are not capable enough to do it all. that we're not capable enough to do this God-sized tasks that you are never, ever, ever going to be big enough to do on your own. But we still feel responsible for that. All right, don't worry. The missions task is greater than we can accomplish without God, but with God, all things are possible. Now, we look around here and we have guys like George, who he's old enough that he can tell you that you can survive. He is still here. It's still coming back to ICCM, so there must be something good about that. But we sit around and we look at these things and we say, I cannot do it. But we can look around and we can see that there are people ahead of us that are still in that, they're still saying, I cannot do it, but they're still there. They're still serving effectively. They're still doing this God-sized task. And it's because God is with us. And we may be held responsible, but in a lot of ways, we are not really responsible. God is responsible, and we need to be obedient to Him. Let's look at this one a little bit here. Okay, I've got it on a different slide. Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. All right, so our situation is a hard one, and places that we tend to go in, for encouragement. So we always have our small community that we go to, your spouse, your Bible study, various things like that. But there's two big places that we as techies, I have heard, like I said, I've talked to a whole bunch of people, and when I ask, where do you go for encouragement? There's two places that people tend to say. One, they say, Tim, we love to talk to you, which is kind of scary, because there is one of me. Now we have another, I've got Kevin Weaver, who also travels around and does some of this. So there's like two of us for the world's population of IT. And if I'm the only thing keeping people from failure, for dying and running off and leaving on missions and stuff, that's a lot of weight to bear. But the other place people say is ICCM. I don't know how many people have told me when they leave ICCM, whenever I come to ICCM, I am encouraged. It gives me what I need to make it through the next year. So I can't talk to everyone. I can't interact as much as I would like to. But ICCM is not, it's not the organization, it is not, ICCM is you. You individually, you corporately, you guys talking to one another. I mentioned yesterday that a big part of what we're trying to do is get you guys to communicate, give opportunities to communicate through one-on-ones, through the BOFs, through the TFM, through the unconference, through all these different things. It is you guys sharing the knowledge that we have, you guys sharing encouragement, you guys talking to each other that builds each other up. And as Jason said, this is where you can feel like yourself. It is a safe place to talk about who you are, what you're going through. Some of you do have coworkers that, okay, well, when we bundle you in prayer pals, we try to get people from different organizations together. So if you need to talk about something, what you talk about doesn't have to go back and be reported to your boss. You don't have to have your boss as your prayer pal. What's your problem? Well, I got problems with my boss. All right. So my keynotes throughout these couple of days are going to touch on some of the issues we face and how we face them. But the real encouragement, and the reason why I said, oh, this is actually going to be an easy keynote to have, is because I'm not going to do the work. My job is not to get you all encouraged. My job is just to kind of say, hey, you're already going to be encouraging each other. Here's some extra things you can do to help that to happen. So during your prayer pals, your meetings, evening socials, you already see we do all this stuff. Make sure you ask how each other are doing, how you guys are doing. And during my fourth or fifth ICCM, I don't remember exactly where it was. By this point in time, I was actually helping out a lot in a bunch of areas. I was one of the lab managers. We had a computer lab at that point in time that was connected to the internet. At that point in time, the internet was new, and people were like, oh, what's the internet? Can you show it to me? And that was kind of my job. I was manning this lab, doing all this stuff. And we had what we called the Muddy Fingers track, where people could install PCs. We had different operating systems, and we would help setting up different environments. People would play with it and destroy it. It was a neat thing. And I was I didn't know an awful lot about stuff. I was just kind of smack in the middle of things, and everyone was coming to me with all these questions. And during this time, there was this one guy who, there was kind of this line forming to talk to me, and every time someone else would come in, he would let them go in front, so he was always the last person in line. And finally, we were walking back to the next big ICCM session. I was closing up the lab. He says, "Tim, can I talk to you on the way back?" "Sure." I said, "What's your question?" And he looked at me, he says, "Tim, how are you doing?" I'm like, what kind of a question is that? And I'm asking, Windows 95 was a big thing. Everybody wanted to know, how do you get rid of it? But he asked me, how was I doing? And we didn't have a big time to talk on the way back. I cannot tell you any of the other questions that people asked me during those times. I don't know any of the techie things. But I remember that guy. I remember his name. I remember him asking me, "Tim, how are you doing?" And that's what we're doing here. I want you guys to check in on each other. Give each other the opportunity to talk about your weariness, how you're tired. We're going to be talking about this throughout the time, the next couple of days. But remember how you got into missions. I always love it when we have some visitors, new guys coming in, the students, they always seem to ask that question, how did you get into missions? Because some of it is they're looking for our story so they can apply it to themselves. Maybe this is going to happen to me, or how is God leading me? And I'll hear your story, which will let me think through my story a little bit. But in this case, I also want you to tell your story, because as you remember your story, it's that hymn, I love to tell the story to those who know it best, because the more you repeat that story, the more it encourages yourself, the more you remember, this is a God-sized task, but God put me in it. He chose me. God put you in the task that you are at. Not because you are big enough to do this God-sized task, but because he wanted you in this particular God-sized hole. And make sure you take time to pray for each other. Prayer pals at dinner. Sometimes we have a big corporate prayer for the meal, but sometimes we don't, so the table will just pray. Make sure you pray for each other. Pray for each other's servers, because there's a lot of problems going on in this world that we have left behind, and sometimes the server problem will come up and our techies will get pulled away for that, but also just pray for each other that they'll be encouraged during ICCM. Remember, you can't always solve each other's problems. Sometimes we'll give each other good advice and stuff, but often what is most important here at ICCM is the listening ear, for somebody to be able to talk through, this is the techie pit I am in. And I remember we get a chance to talk it through, to remember who we are. We acknowledge that they're in a pit. Sometimes we're like, yep, I remember being in that pit. That was a pit. And so make sure we practice listening. Listen with grace and love. Practice oohing and awing at their pit of despair. Realize that everybody's trial, if they're mentioning it as this is a trial, it is a trial for them. We typically don't say, well, we also do talk about our victories. Wow, you guys did this and this was awesome. But when we're talking about a trial, it is something that is weighing on us. And just acknowledge the fact that it is weighing on them. And if we do that, it helps a lot. And again, pray for each other. I don't know why I have that listed multiple times, but it makes a huge difference.